Hey, most golfers slice, and they continue to slice year after year despite watching YouTube instructional videos like this one. But right after this, maybe let's try a fresh perspective on the matter. See if I can't help you cure your slice. Stay tuned. Now, before we get into a new approach, let's look at directly why a golf ball slices. A golf ball slices because the club face is open relative to the path the club is traveling on. Now, what I have found is that most golfers actually who slice, they don't come that far outside to in, and it's not really that much of an influence anyway to come a little bit outside in when you consider the club face is about 83% of the influence on where the ball is going to fly. And so with path is only a small amount, doesn't really matter that much if your path is a little bit out to in. What we've really got to do is focus on getting the club face more square and not leaving it wide open. That's usually what causes it to do that peeling off to the right. Now, a new approach to this is to break the golf swing down into its two most basic components. Everything else is really style points. It's like taking the human body and going all the way down in a microscope to see the DNA level. So there's two pieces of DNA that make up a golf swing. And number one, that's the path of the handle, this end of the stick, or technically it's the mid-hands point. But just for this discussion, we'll call it the handle. And the journey that the handle takes, that's one of the two strands of DNA. Of course, the handle of the club is going to track kind of its own arc through a golf swing. And the second one is going to be the forces or the torques that you apply via your hands into the grip. So that is a golf swing. It's a handle path and its forces are being applied to the grip, and that's it. Everything else is style points, personal preferences, but to be a good golfer, you've got to fall within a reasonable range in both of those two aspects. Therefore, a slicer has to be making an error or not be quite optimal in one of those two areas. Either they have a suboptimal hand path, or they're not creating enough or the right amount of torque and applying it into the grip. It has to be one or the other. And now that certainly makes it easier to break down why you slice now that you know that it's that simple. Now, also in this category, better golfers who might be blockers and some golfers who might just push the ball off to the right where it doesn't curve, it just flies straight off to the right. Well, in all three cases, the club face is pointing into the right rough or the right trees at impact. It's the only way the ball can fly to the right like that is if the club face is pretty much pointing in that direction when it hits the ball. And so again, it's going to be one of the two errors to solve those problems as well, is something is going wrong in the handle path or something is suboptimal in the way you are applying torque to the grip. All right, let's take a look at a couple of the errors that you could possibly make in the hand path that would make you slice. The most typical one is a handle path that has too much verticality. It's too much like a true Ferris wheel. Remember, that's this end of the stick. You might go back fine, and then you do the over-the-top move. And now see, coming into the ball now, the handle of my club is now tracking very vertically, maybe 50, 60, 70 degrees tall, and exiting very vertically as well. And unfortunately with that, that's going to limit you in how much squaring force you can apply. It doesn't give you a natural squaring force, and it would take an awful lot of machinations to get the club face square with that shape of swing. So instead, we want, on a driver, you'd want about a 45-degree hand path. So think of a Ferris wheel tipped 45 degrees on its side, and therefore the hand path would look a little bit more like this and go around the golfer from a bit lower and then go on under lower again. So on both sides of my body, it's well underneath my shoulder line. Now, another error that slicers will typically make by making the sacrifice in the hand path is if they either collapse on the way down and kind of bend the arm into the ball, or some of you out there have actually been coached to pull the butt of the club at the ball in the first part of the swing. Now what that's going to do, that handle path is now performing poorly, and it's going to cause a very natural response, or in this case a non-response, of the club shaft and the club head. Remember that everything that you do in the handle, with the handle, whatever journey it travels on, is going to have a great deal of influence over how the rest of the club responds. Think of it again as a water ski boat pulling a water skier. Well, whatever the boat does has a huge response on, or effect on, what the response of the skier is. So if you were to pull the club or collapse it this way, and instead of swinging the club handle around more of a circular arc into the ball, let's say instead of a circle, you cut through the center of the circle with the handle, cut right through the middle of the circle that way, well, the response is not going to be this uncocking of the wrists and squaring of the face, but rather it's going to be the opposite, as the club shaft and the club head attempt to line up with the direction of the pull at that moment of the handle, which would mean it's almost trying to reverse itself. So unless you apply 2 or 3 times the amount of torque at the hands, you're going to end up looking like this at impact. Open face, ball is slicing. Now for the guy who's technically slicing, it's a better golfer. It's more what we call the block. A block shot kind of starts a little bit to the right, keeps tailing to the right. Again, it's going to be a club face error because the handle path is suboptimal. So in that case, we've got a handle path that typically goes out too long, this way, out to right field too long. The follow through goes steep and out to right field instead of continuing to arc around the body this way. You tend to throw that club out into right field, and that's a really good way also to develop a pretty good block move. Again, that is the path of the handle biasing the response of the shaft and the head. All right, now let's look at a couple of errors that you can make in applying or not applying the right force or enough force to the grip to cause it to square up. So you got to know that there's 3 different families of torque that you could apply to the grip. You could apply torque by pushing on the top of the grip and pulling on the bottom of the grip, like clawing on the, and that would cause this move to happen, an uncocking of the wrists. Then you could have a pushing force on the side of the grip and a pulling force on the other side of the grip, and that might make the club advance this way. So now I'm pushing, see, I'm pushing on the side, and this hand is trying to claw and pull on this side, and it's effectively advancing the club head around the arc because I applied those forces to the grip. So the third one is simply causing the club to spin around itself like this, so I could open it and close it this way without applying really forces in any direction, but simply twirling it this way. That's a third family of torque. Now, in order to keep from slicing, we're going to need a healthy amount of all 3 of those ideas. What I find most slicers, they have a deficit, not of this one, but they have a deficit of this one. So this, to throw the club head past the hands on this plane, generally is not being applied by slicers. The other thing is, and we've talked about it on this channel a lot, and that is this type of force here, this club spinning force. Now, while this may be suboptimal for those at a much higher skill level who are just trying to hit the ball straight consistently and for long distances, the average slicer, that could actually be like like rain after a drought. So at least that move, if you come in open and you haven't done anything else right, that move can technically square the face up and cause the ball to not slice, but instead go down the middle instead. So for the guy who's just hitting it 180 to 220 yards and slicing it all the time, that is perfectly fine technique to use, is turn that toe over by spinning the shaft, and absolutely a reasonable, viable way to cure your slice. In fact, the truth is that even the greatest mechanical swings ever, and everybody nowadays who's a great swinger, everybody has some type of torque. Now remember that torque is just a force that tends to produce rotation. Just because you don't visually see on camera somebody's toe rolling over like this on a swing that you might admire does not mean that they're not applying torque to the grip in that manner. Everybody has to apply this type of torque to the club, otherwise it would probably be left somewhere like 20 or 30 degrees open. So ideally you would like to get the club face squaring through a nice, more shallow hand path this way, rather than this way. And you would like to make sure that you're applying enough of this kind of force. And if you've not figured that part out yet, or maybe your grip is biased towards the slice. Now again, the grip seems like a different category, but it's not. The grip would simply bias you, cause you to have to produce more of this shaft roll or more of this shaft throw towards the target to get the club face square. So even a poor grip would still come down to those two strands of DNA and make them just a little more challenging, which is why most golfers who slice also grip fairly poorly too. Now with most of my students who slice, I've been able to successfully cure them with two of my best drills. I think if you follow these, that there's a high likelihood that you'll cure your slice as well. Now my wrap the pole drill is the best drill that I've ever come up with when it comes to teaching someone how to apply torque to the grip, through the grip of the club, in order to get it advancing and squaring up. Now how do you do this? I've got my left elbow or arm almost touching the pole. I'm going to swing horizontally around waist level, cock the wrist 90 degrees, start uncocking them by throwing the club this way, like the fish are over here, and let that club circle around the pole till it goes from 90 degrees cocked on this side to 90 degrees cocked on this side to the right forearm instead. And if you can do that without banging your elbow against the pole, you're going to cure a lot of what's wrong with your slice swing. So draw it back, cock the wrist, throw the club around the pole, throw the club around the pole, and maybe pose for it for 2 or 3 seconds and feel this new position that your left arm is in. Now this not only teaches you how to apply the right amount of torque and the right type of torque to get the face to square up. Here's a square face, and I'm going to throw it right back to square again, like this. But it also gets rid of one of the potential causes of handle path error to cause you to slice. You see, again, that's that pulling of the handle into the ball this way. Its drill doesn't allow you to do that because you'll bang your elbow against the pole. So you have to throw the head around instead of trying to pull the handle into the ball. Now my best drill for getting more horizontal into your hand path, so that you can't, if you're too vertical, remember, the club face is not going to want to square up quite as easily. So a lot of people, they're fine on the backswing, but then they come down very vertically, what we call maybe over the top, and of course you would hit the stick and even hit the bucket on your way into the ball. So this way, if you can line up the bucket about even with the target line like this, and you can get the club, the stick, about the same angle as the club shaft at address. If you go really slow, you can start to feel what a good, more horizontal hand path looks like. Let's go real slow here. And there's a nice draw from the inside right off the bat. Now, the mistake people will make is going too fast too soon. So keep it very slow motion at first. Do a lot of dry swings with this exercise. And what it's doing is it's teaching you how to lay that Ferris wheel a lot more down on a horizontal axis, like a 45-degree angle, like the angle of the stick, rather than so vertical on the way down, which gives you a bias to leave the face open. So hopefully breaking down the swing and looking at it in this fresh perspective of two strands of DNA, just handle path and forces being applied to the grip, you can get to the root of the problem why you slice. Not everybody slices for the same reasons. Most people slice for a couple common reasons, but not everybody, which is why you should try both of the drills that I presented in this video. And I think for a lot of you out there, it's really going to bring your slice around nicely. You might get some extra distance and start drawing the ball fairly quickly. But if not, remember, break it down into those two elements and some of those errors that I suggested, and you can try some of the ideas I've presented in this video. And just remember that slicing almost always calls for a simple correction in the angle of the club face at impact, and you should be on your way nicely getting rid of your slice quickly. Hey, if you have any questions or comments on this, I hope you'll leave them down below in the comment section, especially if one of these drills is exciting to you or new or has helped you out. I'd appreciate some feedback. Hey, I'm Steve. Thanks so much for watching. And as usual, I'll either see you in the next video or I'll see you longer and straighter down the fairway. Everybody take good care.